Hello, welcome listeners to another episode of Listen, Learn, and Love, hosted by Richard Osler. My guest on today's podcast is a service missionary. He's joining me via Zoom. I can see him in a suit and tie. Elder Jack Smith, J-A-X Smith, not J-A-C-K Smith. Welcome to the podcast, Elder Smith.
Thank you, Richard. I really appreciate it. Thank you for allowing me to be here and share my story with these wonderful listeners who share so much love and peace with the world.
I know you're Elder Smith right now, but tell us your first name. What do you go by?
So my first name is Jackson, but I go by Jax because there are so many Jacksons. There were so many Jacksons in my high school. That was so, you hear on the intercom, Jackson Smith. There were 3 or 4 in my high school. And so all 4 would come down to the office and they meant just one. And so it's kind of funny. So I decided to start going by Jax instead of Jackson.
Well, that's great. And I can see your Elder Smith name badge.
Yes, sir.
Listeners, as I visited with Elder Smith, I was just overcome with respect for this brave man willing to share his story as a gay Latter-day Saint and also being multi-ethnic and maybe not fitting always the mold of what it is to be a Latter-day Saint along the Wasatch Front, and his courage. So we said a prayer, and I just hope this podcast will help you if you're an ally or a parent, or if you're an LGBTQ Latter-day Saint, to feel a little hope as you hear, and support and joy as you hear Elder Smith's story. He's joining us from Utah County. That's where he grew up, in Highland, Utah. He's 25. He's part Hispanic, part Black, part Native American, and part Polynesian. So I think that's super awesome about you. And as we were visiting, he says, yeah, I'm just super brown. But I love that you just said that without shame. And I just think that's the way our heavenly parents feel about you too, is you're super brown, wonderful child. He's going to talk about navigating from a proselyting mission and health issues, service missionary, being out as gay, kind of managing that, getting advice from leaders, and his courage to be open about his sexual orientation. He's going to talk about a broken engagement about 4 years ago to a woman, and that's kind of what led him coming out. Super brave to talk about that. It
was actually to a man, not to a woman.
Oh, well, there you go. My bad assumption.
It's all good.
Thank you for clarifying that. And then he's going to talk a little bit about UVU, Utah Valley University LGBTQ Institute. There is a class there. And I've spoken at that class and attended. It's just a great class. And at the Institute, he may talk about what that means to him to be able to go to that class. Is that okay for an introduction, Elder Smith?
That was perfect. Thank you, Richard.
So we'll turn it over to you, and thank you in advance for sharing your story.
Of course. No, thank you. I really appreciate it. Yeah, so my story really began when I was about between 10 and 13 years old, where all my friends were going through puberty and they're starting to like girls. It was kind of funny. I started looking at my friends and like, wait, is this normal? And I wasn't really sure what to think of it because I started finding guys attractive. I'm like, okay, I've been told from a really young age that that's wrong, that that's not what we believe in as a church, that anyone who does that, isn't really a part of his fold. And that was something that was really hard for me to swallow. Like, an all-loving God doesn't love me because I'm a little different. And I didn't realize how different I really was from everyone else until later on. One of my cousins came out as gay, and his court case actually helped get gay marriage legalized here in Utah.
Wow.
That was pretty cool. But after that happened, a lot of my family ridiculed him, saying that he knew better, that wasn't who he is, and that he has to atone for the sins that he's making right now. And so it put a deep seed in me that I can never, ever come out to anyone, that I have to pretend to be straight for the rest of my life, and I can't stray from that path. And that was so hard for me. And going into middle school, going into just school in general, it was so hard because I just felt like alone. I felt like an outcast. In elementary school, it was super hard. Even the people that, quote unquote, normal people wouldn't hang out with, I even felt an outcast in. I felt like I never had any true friends that actually cared or understood. and going to church was great. Going to church growing up was good, but I still felt like an outcast. Like I didn't really have anyone that was there, that was a support that I could lean on. And that was so hard because I would read in the scriptures that the church is supposed to be a support, it's supposed to be a comfort to those that are mourning, that are dealing with something like I was. And that was extremely hard to not understand why I didn't feel that peace and that love from the other members of my ward. So fast forward to middle school, I I kind of like this one guy, and that was super hard. He was also gay, and we would hang out a lot. Nothing ever happened, but it was the feelings that kind of started there. And I told my parents like, "Hey, I might like this guy," and they're like, "Nope, that's just a figment of your imagination. That's not true. It's just the way of the world, and you're trying to follow the world and not follow Jesus Christ." I'm like, yeah, no, that's true. And I believed him for a long time. And during middle school, I was bullied relentlessly for just being a little different. I had food thrown at me a lot in middle school, and that was crazy. I mean, you only really hear about those things in like the movies or TV shows, right? You don't really see it or think it would ever happen to you. And it happened to me quite a bit. And middle school was my own personal hell. It was so hard. I felt like I was in a dark pit and I could never get out because I didn't have anyone. Everyone had their own groups, their own friends, and I just didn't. And so it was devastating to me to see these good members of the church, these pretend to be good members of the church on Sundays, and then treat someone who's a little different horribly on other days of the week. So a lot of things didn't really compute for me. And that was extremely hard. So fast forward going into my sophomore year of high school, I tried to come out publicly. And before that, I actually talked to my sister, my siblings. I asked my sister if we can talk. She's about 10 years older than I am. She's always been like another mother to me. We've always been super close. And I just said, hey, I want to share something with you. And she's like, okay, what is it? Like, are you okay? Like, what's going on? And I said, yeah, no, everything's good. I just, it was so hard. It's still hard. I just said, hey, I just want to let you know that I'm gay. That I don't like women, and I've tried, but I don't find any part about it appealing. And it took her a second. Well, we were walking, and she just gave me a hug and said, I love you. And that to me was the best support that I could ever receive. And next, I told my older brother, who's 8 years older than I am. And I said, hey, just kind of the same thing. I just want to let you know, like, I'm gay, and I don't really know what I'm doing anymore. And he said, once again, I love you and I support you. I'm going to be here for you. Whatever you need, let me know. And that to me, once again, was just it resembled the love that my Heavenly Father has for me. And at that point, I was going through a really hard time. During my sophomore year, towards the end of it, I actually lost both of my grandmothers within a few months of each other. And that was really hard. The two people I admired most both passed away. The glue that kept our whole families on both sides together had both passed. And it just put me into a deeper and darker depression than I ever thought I could ever go through. And it got to the point where that suicidal ideation I took action upon. And I was hospitalized and then went into a facility to help with that for about 2 weeks. And coming out of that, I realized that I need to choose to stay. I need to choose to live a better life, to be better for myself, to let other people know that I'm here, that everything's going to be okay, and that our Heavenly Father has my life in His hands. To be able to go through that experience, to be able to feel His love for me, even while I was in agony in that hospital. knowing who Jesus Christ was helped me get through that. Every day on my knees praying, asking for peace, asking for relief. Because that depression, that anxiety, it really has never gone away. I still deal with it to this day. And that's so hard to deal with, especially as a missionary. It's not easy. Every day looks a little different, but the constant is kind of the anxiety, not being sure what to do or where to go. And so that's been extremely hard to navigate. Excuse me. And so going through high school, still after that experience with my family, with my parents, I decided to retract my statement about coming out as gay and to take down that post, to go back into the closet, if you will. And so I did for a long time, and which led up to my senior year of high school. I knew I wanted to serve a mission, and so I put in my papers, and this was back in 2019. And so I put in my papers, and it took almost a whole year to hear back for a mission call, which was crazy. That was really weird. That was a hard experience. I felt so in love. Like I'm like, why me? You know, like why do I have to go through this? Why isn't it my friend down the street? Why isn't it my other family members who all got their calls within a week or two? But to wait for almost a whole year to get a mission call, I just felt abandoned. Like, this church doesn't love me. What's going on? And meeting with my stake president, my bishop, almost every single week, being in constant communication with them, like, hey, what's going on? Where's my mission call? Am I even going to go out? Like, I'm worthy to go out. And that was really hard. I'm finally in February of 2020, before the whole pandemic happened, I got my mission call. I was serving as a hospice care worker down in Benjamin, Utah, which is about 45 minutes to an hour away. Anyways, my client was sitting in this chair taking a nap, and I get a text. And it's a text from the church saying, hey, your mission call is ready to view. And at that point, I didn't even know that the church sent him out that way. And it was some random number. And so I'm like, hey, which one of my friends is messing with me? Like, is this a joke? Like, what's going on? And I clicked on the link, thinking it would be like some spam type of text or message. And it took me to the church's website and said, your mission call is ready to view. And I opened it, and it says Alabama Birmingham Mission. And I was ecstatic. I called my parents. I said, hey, my mission call just came. And they're like, okay, did you open it? I'm like, define open. Like, did you click on the link? And I said, yes. I'm like, okay, where are you going? I said, I'm going to Alabama. And that joy was there. And the overwhelming feeling of peace that just rushed over me. That the Lord still knows me. The Lord still has a plan for me. And that his plan is perfect. The timing, the waiting, and everything. I wouldn't have had the experience, the knowledge, the maturity to go without having to wait longer. And so I finally get my mission call. I go through the MTC, and this was right when the pandemic was going on now. And so we had to do home MTC for 3 weeks. And that was so hard. That was so hard. Extremely difficult because I was just at home. I couldn't leave, couldn't really do anything. My companion lived in another state. It was me, my companion, and then 2 sisters. So there were 4 of us in the district, which was really cool because we got pretty close. But at the end of those 3 weeks, I have diabetes. And so they were extremely hesitant to actually send me out. And so when all my district left, I was still at home. I was still by myself. And so I kept asking, kept waiting. Okay, when am I going out? When can I go out? What's the next step? What am I doing? And every week, the stake president or the mission president would say, hey, next week, next week, next week. And this went on for about 4 months. And it got to the point where I was just so fed up, so angry with everything and everyone, that I called up my stake president and said, hey, I'm done. I can't keep doing this. And at this point, I was filled with so much anger and frustration that I actually wanted to leave the church. I wanted to be done. And so eventually I did. I stopped going to church every week. I went every once in a while, but it wasn't consistent. I actually went into my stake president's office at the time. And I said, President, I'm done. Here's my temporary recommend. I can't do this anymore. This church is too hard. I can't keep living these rules and living this, what feels like a lie to me. And his response, only way that president could say it was, Jackson, will you do me a favor? And I said, sure, President, whatever you need. And he said, will you go to Institute? And I said, why the heck would I go to Institute? I'm trying to leave this freaking church. Why would I do that? And he said, just try it. And at that point, I started dealing with drug and alcohol abuse. And so it was really hard for me to actually want to show my face in church or any church function. And I couldn't really understand or realize why he would ask me to do that. So I waited a long time to actually go. And I was dealing with the alcohol abuse for a long time. And it got to a point where after I was done with that mission, still dealing with alcohol abuse, I met a missionary who lived in my home stake, and his name was Elder Jenkins. And he's still one of my best friends to this day. And his first day we met, he had the goofiest little smile on his face. He deer in the headlights look for most missionaries know what that's like, getting to a new area, new place, fresh out of the MTC. And he and I just had a one-on-one conversation. His companion gave us a little bit of space. And so I could talk to him and get to know him. And from that point on, he and I just became best friends. We understood each other on a deep and emotional level. And he was one of the first people I actually came out to outside of my family. I told him pretty early on. And the difference between him and the other people that I've told that weren't family was he actually stayed in my life, which to me is still crazy. It's still crazy to me to think about that now. And he and I just became good friends. And so wherever he went, I would go about once or twice a week just to get to know him and be around him and his companion. At this point, it's around the end of 2020, where I met my ex-fiance, which was still crazy to think about. And he and I dated for a few months. We decided to get married, and he was great. He still is great. He's still very kind, still loving. But something I wanted was to continue to go to church, which was weird because that never kind of really crossed my mind until I started dating him. And I told him, like, hey, are you willing to go to church with me if we get married? And at the beginning, he said yes. And so I would start going to church every week again. And I told him, hey, like, are you going to come with me this week? Are you going to come with me this week? And he said no most of the time. And the one time he said yes, the bishop saw us holding hands. And a few members of the ward did too. And that's when I got hurt, extremely hurt. Some members of my ward, my YSA ward, come up to me and tell me I'm going to hell. And it took me by surprise, because these are people I considered friends, people I've served in colonies with that know me. And I was beside myself. I didn't know what to do. And so I go to my bishop. I said, hey, Bishop, these members of the ward are saying this to me. That's actually really getting to me. It makes me hurt. I don't feel the love. I don't feel the kindness. And he said they were right. that they were right to condemn me, to treat me like that. And I didn't know what to do. I was in shock. I got up and I left the office, vowing to never come back to church. And at that point, I still kept in contact with Elder Jenkins, and I was still dating Ben. And Elder Jenkins got this trainee. His name is Elder Tuwala, and he's a good friend as well. And they were companions for about a transfer, so 6 weeks. And Elder Jenkins left to a new area, and Elder Tuwala stayed. And Elder Tuwala and I started to become really good friends. And he started to train another elder, and we all became really, really good friends. Almost every night I would take them out to go do missionary work. And it helped me feel like my mission is there. And I'm still a missionary. I'm still participating in ways I never thought I could, while I was still struggling with alcoholism. Anyways, they invited me over to watch their Christmas devotional with them. And I said, okay. And something that's super important to know is that I received my endowments back out in Michigan, the Detroit, Michigan temple. My family flew out there to go visit my aunt, and that's where I received my endowments. And after that, my father served, he served his mission in the Rochester, New York mission. And so from Michigan, we drove to New York to visit the church history sites in high school after I graduated. And so during that time, I really came to know and understand that this is the gospel of Jesus Christ, that I actually do have a testimony, even if the people hurt me, if they hate me, that Jesus Christ is what I need to rely on. And yes, oftentimes we forget that. I forget that all the time, even as a missionary, and it's hard. But going back to watching that Christmas devotional with those elders, they watched The Fighting Preacher, which is the story of how the church acquired the Sacred Grove and the New York history sites. And watching that movie and feeling the Spirit so strongly saying, this is true, this is right. And that the relationship I was in with my ex-fiance, I needed to get out of. And so at the end of the movie, I told him, I said, hey, the Spirit confirmed this to me, that I need to get out of this relationship and I need help. And they said, all right, we have your back. It was the first time I ever felt like someone really did have my back, that someone was actually there, that they cared. And it was so cool. And so I texted up my ex-fiance asking him to meet. And this was on Christmas Day, which was probably not the best thing. But we met on Christmas and I broke it off. I said, hey, I can't keep doing this with you if you're not willing to follow what I want to follow. If you're not willing to get married and to keep going to church, to be active. And he said, I understand. And so I said, okay, sounds good. And so we broke it off. And it was hard at first. And it was just it was a really humbling experience. And so after that, I decided, well, if I was engaged to another man, I should probably come out publicly again, fully. And so I did. So I posted on my Facebook, my Instagram. And I said, hey, just so you know, I'm a disciple of Jesus Christ. I am not different. I'm the same person. I know my Heavenly Father loves me for who I am. He made me this way. And that is never going to change. I want you all to know I'm gay. And I received so much love and support from a lot of my family. And those missionaries that I was super close with, they actually commented on that post saying, I love you. I'm here for you. I support you. A few days later, after I posted that, and those missionaries commented on my post, I get a voice recording and a text from one of my buddies, one of the missionaries saying, "Hey, this is what President Evanson said. This is what the mission president said um, in his own council, in his own conference meeting. He asked all the elders to stay back. And the mission president said, you should not be congratulating this person, me, Jackson, on coming out as gay. He's following the way of Satan, and he will lead you all to hell. This isn't the Lord's plan. This isn't what he has for any of you. He's following the world's way, and you can't be his friend. You can't be in contact with him. You need to cut all contact." And that was so hard.
Wow.
That my support system was just ripped away from me. That the people that actually showed care and love, no matter where they were in the mission, they reached out to me. They asked me to help them. They asked me to do stuff with them. And to have that taken away crushed me, made me angry and bitter. That even though I knew the church was true, I still decided to leave it again. And I actually started going to a Baptist church for a few years. And in going to that Baptist church, I realized that what was so important is Jesus Christ. That all they really talk about is Jesus. They don't really talk about anything else. And with that, I decided to take my stake presence invitation a few years back. I started going to Institute. And there's one teacher, his name is Brother Monson. And it was during the summer that I started taking his class, and it was called Jesus Christ and the Everlasting Gospel. And at that point, I was starting to deal with more and more health issues. I have a skin condition where I get a lot of blisters and cysts all over my body. And so I wasn't able to make it to class every week. The coolest thing about Brother Monson was that no matter if I was there that week or if I wasn't, he would still text me asking how I was doing and asking if I'm going to come to class. And the Institute was the first place I felt accepted in the church. That it didn't matter what my skin color was, what my sexual orientation was. They loved me for me. And it just surprised me that these educated, well-educated men with church history degrees, doctrine, all these different things, they saw past the arrogance of most church members. And they loved me for me. They saw me as a child of God. And even though I was going to that Baptist church, I kept going to Institute because I also felt the Spirit there. And so going into 2022, I was at a family function and my uncle pulls me aside. And at this point, I was still dealing with alcoholism. He pulls me aside and he says, "Hey, Jax, I wanted to ask you and tell you, I'm being made a bishop of this YSA ward down in Provo. And I don't know if you still go to church or not, but I would love for you to come to my ward."
Wow.
I said, "Uncle Rob, thanks. I appreciate that invitation. The church I go to is actually down in Provo, so yeah, sometime for sure, I'll try and swing by." And it was a few weeks after that I felt a distinct impression from Heavenly Father to actually go to his ward. So after services at the Baptist church, I go to his ward. And I was dealing with so much anxiety that I was just shaking constantly, that even setting foot in a chapel before that moment, I couldn't even sit there. I had to stand outside of the chapel because it was so hard for me to be back there. With all those memories, the hurt, the anger. And I finally forced myself to go into the chapel, and I sat in the front row off to the left. And I was by myself, and my uncle got up to conduct a meeting. And I don't really remember a lot of things that was said, but what I remember was that feeling. After he was done conducting, he sat back down, and I kid you not, every 5 minutes, he looked over at me, shaking his head to make sure if I'm okay. And that instilled something in me, and it made me think, no, that's what the Savior would do. He would look after that one lost sheep that's gone astray, and he focuses on him. And that changed my life forever. And so I kept going back, and I stopped going to the Baptist church. I started going to this ward. And I was still dealing with that abuse. And my uncle pulled me aside one day. He said, "Jax, if you keep coming to my ward, you're going to get a calling." I said, "All right, Rob, I'm just letting you know, like, I still do this. Like, I don't want to give this up. I'll keep coming to church, but I don't want to give this up." And he said, "Okay, cool. You're still getting a calling." And I said, "All right, whatever." And he kept pestering me. And finally, he's like, "All right." He told the first counselor in the bishopric, "Pull him aside." And so he pulled me aside, and he said, "Jackson, your assignment is to be the ward family and history. The ward family history co-chair and temple co-chair." And I said, "So it's not accepting, it's not anything like that." He's like, "No, this is your calling. You don't get a choice." And so I said, "Okay." And so I started serving, and I changed. I stopped alcohol within a week. I stopped drinking. And I was serving, and I felt this need to start serving in the temple. And so I started serving in the Provo temple. And I kept going, kept serving there. And one day I was downstairs in the study room of the Provo temple, and I see all the missionaries from the MTC come over. And I think to myself, no, what could have been? That would have been nice. I wish I could have done that. And I hear a voice, the voice of the Lord, come down and say, "You need to go on a mission." And I look up, I'm like, frick that. I already did my time. I'm good. I don't need to go on a mission. And so I put it out of my mind for about a month, when I hear the voice distinct, louder and clear, saying, "Get up and go. You need to go on a mission." And so I say, "Okay." So I called my uncle. I said, "Hey, I need to go on a mission." We met, started my mission papers, got the papers done within a week. And it was crazy. And this was in 2023. And so this was in 23. And so I get the call, and it's the Birmingham, Alabama, the same mission call. With a unique twist, they said I can pick when I get to leave. I can pick March 18th or April 22nd. And so I picked March 18th. And going through the interview process, meeting with my stake president, and my old mission president, who I was still in contact with from that first time, from the first mission, because we were in contact every single week. I asked them both, I said, "Hey, I just want to let you guys know that I'm gay." And they both gave the same counsel. That's not why you're on a mission. You need to focus on your missionary purpose. It's not to find a love, it's to join the work of the Lord. I said, "Yeah, that's fair. I'll take that counsel." And so I did. And so in serving in the MTC, when I was in the MTC, I didn't tell anyone. I kept it a secret. And then after in the MTC, I got really sick. So sick that I was actually wheelchair bound for about a week and a half of the MTC that I was there. And so because of that, I had to come home. And so after that, I came home and I was made a service missionary. And in doing so, I have found so much joy and fulfillment. We found out what happened to me, what went wrong. And so I started to proselyte my home mission. And my trainer, there were rumors about me being gay because I lived in my home mission. And so my trainer, this is my first day, said, "If you're gay, I'm going to beat you." If you try anything, I'm going to beat you.
Oh,
And I was taken back. And so I had to fight so hard. Like, nope, I'm not gay. Nope, I don't like guys. Nah, I'm good. I like women. And that put me into a pretty dark place, a pretty deep depression because I was hiding a part of myself. I was hiding who I was, and I couldn't be expressive with that. Where all my buddies on the mission were, saying they like this person, so and so. And I'm like, yeah, me too, kind of sheepishly and shy. And so it was extremely hard. And so with that, I had to pretend to be someone I wasn't. And during the summer, my skin condition started to flare up, and so I had to come back to being a service missionary, and so I did, and I did it begrudgingly. I was not happy about it, and so I continued to serve. What else? 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 What else would I say? Like, it doesn't change how I feel about you. It doesn't change the work that we're doing. It doesn't change anything. I love you for who you are. I'm going to love you and support you no matter what. And that to me is just like, oh my gosh, like, wow, he's actually there. Like, someone's going to stay. And Elder Wright and I served in one area for about 5 months. And so he and I got super, super close. We know a lot of things about each other. And to share that connection has been one of the biggest blessings of my life. Because I shared that with him, I was able to share that with basically the rest of the mission and to be okay with it. Whereas some missionaries told other missionaries without me knowing beforehand or whatever it was, because that happened a lot. I became so comfortable with being who I am, being gay, that it didn't hurt me and I wasn't scared. That if someone really wanted to get to know me instead of judging me based on something that's true, they can come get to know me. That I'm not different. I'm still a missionary. I'm still doing the same work they're doing. It's not different. And so that has been one of the biggest blessings of my life, to be able to know that Jesus Christ is there for me. And Christmas of this last year was probably the biggest change of my whole life. We were on split, so I had Elder Wright's other companion. And so I had him, and we went to a stake center in Lehigh. And I had to use the restroom. And so after I was done with the restroom, we come out and we hear choir singing, and we see a little flyer that says North Star Gathering. I'm like, what's this? This is intriguing. Wasn't sure what it was. And so there's a man in a brightly colored suit. I said, hey, what is this? He's like, oh, this is North Star. I'm like, okay, what's North Star? He's like, it's an LGBTQ plus group of saints. I said, that's awesome. That's so cool. And he said, what do you guys like to stay? I'm like, we actually have a meeting right now, but come back. And my companion at the time, he said, Elder Smith, why the heck would you want to go back to be with a bunch of faggots?
oh,
I was like, excuse me, Elder, that is not something you should talk about. Talk about anyone like that. That is extremely inappropriate. And he just rolled his eyes at me. And so being stubborn and being the senior companion, we go to our meeting and then we go right back. And I said, we're going to be here until the end of this thing, whether you like it or not. And so he and I both sat in the chapel. And I texted Elder Wright. I said, hey, just so you know, this is what happened. So we're here. And I said, cool, we're on our way. And so he and another service missionary came, and the service missionary Elder Wright was with, and Elder Steve. this other elder went into the foyer. And Elder Wright sat there with me the whole time. And I felt that love again. I felt accepted. That it didn't matter. That was so cool. And to see a member of the stake presidency that we were serving in up on the stand, conducting the meeting, presiding over it, was the coolest thing. I'm like, oh my gosh, people are changing. There's love, there's peace, there's hope. And his name is Rob Murphy. And he's one of my personal heroes because he and his wife Tasha changed the way I look at being open, wanting to be open with everyone. And through that experience, I've just become so comfortable with who I am, not having to hide anymore. And it's been great. And that's my story.
Wow. Listeners, just like you, I don't know the stories in advance, and I listen like you are. And this is a beautiful story, complex, painful, joyful. Every human emotion is represented in Elder Smith's story. And this could be like 5 different podcasts. You're 25 and your life experiences are like, way beyond 25. You did just a great job. And just remarkable. And, listeners, I kind of write down what I popped out to me, so I'll share those. And Elder Smith and I will keep talking. Middle school, my personal hell. You have a way with words. You're honest. I love your older brother and your older sister. I love you. I support you. I love you being honest with suicidal ideation and hospitalization. And then your words I wrote down, I choose to stay. And that's the primary reason I'm in this space, listeners, is to help people that are suicidal and LGBTQ stay. And often it's hearing from brave people like you that give them hope. And some people say there's no light at the end of the tunnel, Brother Osler. And I think that's true for some. It's a sobering place to be, but I think if you can choose to stay and just stay another day, I think your older self, if they could talk to you, would tell you there is a light at the end of the tunnel eventually and things get better. You just casually mentioned you're a hospice care worker.
Oh, yeah.
Isn't that cool? It's just kind of an insight into you. That's not an easy space to be serving in. The hospice care workers that I've been aware of as we took care of my dad, they're some of my heroes, and they're thoughtful, they're compassionate, they know how to. So that's just who you are. I love that your call came while you were working there. Then just these really difficult, choppy mission experiences. You started this journey pre-COVID, and it's 25. So you've been on a proselyting mission, trying to go on a mission, service mission, navigating really positive experiences, navigating really difficult experiences. And you've just done a great job. This is a podcast where we talk about hard church experiences, listeners. And we do that because when we know better, we do better. And sometimes these experiences make us feel uncomfortable, but often for me, that's the growth I sometimes need to make to do better, is to be uncomfortable and recognize that, I'm not perfect and others aren't perfect. I just validate how painful your experience was as a proselyting missionary, and coming back and just so much pain and anger that you felt, you needed to leave the church. And really good people feel that way, and really good people leave the church. And sometimes they turn to coping mechanisms to deal with the pain. Pain's a primary emotion, anger's sort of secondary. And yeah, drug and alcohol aren't consistent with our teachings, but often they're a coping mechanism or a way to escape. And so, while I wouldn't invite you to do that, I sort of connect the dots. That seems like something that came into your life because of the circumstances. And I'm careful there, listeners. I don't want to excuse it. You're not either. But I don't think you just woke up one day and say, what can I do to displease God? Okay, I'll do drugs and alcohol. It's more complex than that. And I think the bottom of your core is really good. Then I love you giving names to some of these people that are so helpful in your life. Elder Jenkins. Who is Elder Jenkins out there? and what a incredible disciple of Christ you are. And, we heal each other through people. And I love these words. He stayed in my life after coming out, and he didn't leave, and he was just there. And I just love that story. I love your honesty of dating men, finding a fiance, and just feeling that was your path. And I'm glad you shared that. And even inviting him to come to the YSA ward, and then this really difficult experience at the YSA ward where you came in holding hands, and you got a lot of condemnation for that. And, listeners, I might have done that in the past, but now the principle, I think, of a home ward or a YSA ward is, I think the gate is wide at the congregation level. And everything that I see about Christ's ministry is he's welcoming everybody and not creating, he's not a sifter at that point. I think the gate narrows to go to the temple where there's a belief and behavior hurdle. But I think the congregation, unless you're an activist creating a disturbance, I think we should just be mature enough to welcome everybody where they are. And some people are in a same-sex relationship, and that may be more outward because they're holding hands, and other people are working through other stuff. And I just think we do better when we just welcome people at church. And I've always felt we're called to be gatherers, not sifters, and it's not our job to judge you and say where you're going in the next life because you're walking in hand with your boyfriend and potentially getting married. So I just feel really strong about that, listeners. And this is sort of Brother Oster going off on a tangent. I've been Mormon theology, if that's okay, Elder Smith, but I've been thinking a lot about the law of love. Steve Young wrote a book about the law of love, and often we'll say the first law of heaven is obedience. And I'm not sure I'm completely comfortable with that, listeners. I love obedience, and I'm not trying to sell out obedience, but I wonder if the first law of heaven is love. And our doctrine is we're taught to love the Lord with all our heart and love our fellow men as ourselves. And so my wife and I have seen Les Mis a few times over the years. She introduced it to me, and it took me a long time to get used to the music. But I just love that show. And when we saw it recently, Elder Smith and listeners, I just saw Jean Valjean, this guy had been in prison for 19 years, steal from the Catholic priest. And then the Catholic priest, as he was being arrested, as you that know that story, the silver that he stole in front of the police and all the people around, he gave him additional silver and said, "You forgot these two." And then just said, "Take God with you." And that wasn't the law of obedience. That was the law of love that just transformed Jean Valjean into the man he became in that movie. The man I want to be like, and I want to model that priest. And to me, that's what Christ did. And Steve Young talked a lot about that in his book, The Law of Love. So I sometimes wonder if we can change people's behavior more with love than anything else. Even the study of doctrine, which is good, and this seems part of your story, because then you talk. So I'm moving on from Elder Jenkins and just this love he had for you, and a difficult YSA ward experience that seemed more transactional and more obedience, and that didn't help you. You probably knew the church's teachings, but then you have your uncle's YSA ward, and then you talk about Christ and going to the Baptist church, and how even though the church at times has failed you or individuals have failed you, Christ never failed you. And you recognize that you could find Christ in other ways. And I support that journey in the Baptist church. But eventually, it led to your acting on your stake president's invitation to go to Institute. And then you talk about Brother Monson. I love the way you give a name. And you wrote in these words, you said, "It's the first place I've ever felt accepted at church." So Brother Monson, whatever you did, I think was the law of love. And you just love Jackson Smith and help them to feel welcome and help them to feel the love of Christ. And then you go to your YSA ward down in Provo, same place as the Baptist Church, and you're still working through alcohol, but they extend you this calling. And I just thought that was awesome. You don't need to be perfect to have a church calling, and you were transparent and honest, but then it seemed like serving just ended alcohol for you. So I don't think you were addicted to alcohol or drugs. I just think it was part of a coping mechanism. And once you connected with the temple and then you became a temple worker, you felt the desire to go on a mission. And can you believe that with all the pain you've gone through and all the church disappointment along your way, this is incredibly courageous to sort of step back into the pain of your prior self life and say, I'm going to try that again. It's just a sign of your incredible courage and maybe more importantly, your desire to help other people feel the love of Jesus Christ, because you've felt that in your own life and you want others to do that. And so then you go on your mission again and you have some good experiences. You have some health issues. You have some really difficult experiences. And then Elder Wright comes along and says, that's cool, as you tell him you're gay. And so I just want to be like the Brother Monsons, the Elder Jenkins, Elder Wrights, and others you've mentioned, and be those people that just love you for who you are and aren't trying to change you and help you feel you belong. I'm reminded of a couple missionaries that have been on the podcast. Elder Carpenter, a long time ago, listeners came on the podcast, Shane Carpenter. If you want to Google it, you can put Shane Carpenter, Richard Osler into your Google search engine, you'll find it. But when he arrived in his mission, just to give you an idea of where some mission presidents are on this subject, he said, President, I'm gay. And he said, that is great. Will you, if you're willing to be out and open, will you teach us about LGBTQ inclusion? We're going to be teaching LGBTQ investigators. And so instead of hiding this part about him, he thought, and I agree with, this is part of creating Zion. This part of you actually helps us be a more Zion people. So if you're willing to talk about this, I'm willing to have your back. And it's going to cause some tension at time for you, but I'm going to have your back and it'll help us grow to be a more Zion-like mission. Super brave for both the mission president and the missionary. And that mission president allowed him to be on the podcast his last P day of his mission, just like you are coming on as a full-time missionary. And that Elder Troxel up in Canada, he put on his social media, gay Latter-day Saint missionary. And so that was what he put on his social media. Not everybody needs to do that, but then he came on the podcast, and so everybody kind of knows he's gay. And he just talks about he was able to reach people that no one else could reach. And this one sister said, well, Elder Troxel, if there's room in that church for you, maybe there's room for me. So I believe that who you are is a good thing, Elder Smith, being multiracial and being gay. This is how I believe your heavenly parents created you. And they don't want you to look in the mirror and feel shame for any part of who you are, just like a straight missionary wouldn't. And they love you. And then you have this added gift because the atonement and Christ isn't theoretical for you. It's not just, it's personal, because you've had to go to Christ over and over again. I'm putting words in your mouth, but I think this is what you've shared with our listeners. He's your rock. He never has left you. He loves you. He loves you completely. And he's there to heal you from the woundedness of being gay and being biracial, multiracial.
It reminds me of one of my favorite quotes from a movie. It's a Mormon movie. It's called Mobsters and Mormons. I remember watching that growing up. But there's one line in it that says, the church is true, but the people aren't. I changed that to the gospel of Jesus Christ is true, but the people aren't, because we're not perfect. But when we're able to look past the pain, the hurt, the suffering that people cause us and truly focus on, like you said, the rock. He's a rock. He's our Redeemer. When we focus on him, those experiences, the hurt, the pain washes away. Because of what he did in the Garden of Gethsemane for us. We don't have to carry that guilt and shame anymore. We're free from our burdens, free from those chains and those thorns in our side. They may still linger upon us and in us, Yet through Jesus Christ, it becomes easier to bear those burdens because we're yoked to him. We're not yoked to anyone or anything else.
Wow. Could be a theologian one day. Maybe you already are. I have developed a similar framework as yours, Elder Smith. I used to say the church is true, the people aren't. And now I kind of do what you say. I say the gospel of Jesus Christ is perfect. It's the pure spring water in a pool. And the church is a mortal organization, the sides of the pool that's needed for the gospel to become a reality in our life. But it isn't perfect. It is capable, and the people are part of that, is capable of not being perfect. And so I've just had to develop a kind of a different type of testimony to help me as a Latter-day Saint stay in the church. And so sometimes church members, church leaders, institutional things about working through getting your call and waiting a year represents sort of those imperfect sides of the pool. And sometimes when we sit in the pool, we expect this porcelain smooth feeling below the waterline, and somebody else may sit in the pool and below the waterline get a little jab in the back, and we can't even see it, but they feel it. And so we need to honor that pain. I call it church-generated pain. And even if somebody has never felt that as a Latter-day Saint, others might feel that. And I think it's just part of our job to honor their pain. I've also thought about, you've had two journeys, if I got it right, not being in the church.
Correct.
And I've thought, how do we treat people that no longer go to church? And I don't know this is the right answer, but somebody tweeted a long time ago, it just resonated with me. People, I'm paraphrasing this woman's tweet, people deserve to be loved, not because our love will bring them back to the church, but just because they deserve to be loved. And I've sort of thought about non-transactional love, that I'm just going to love people on their road without an agenda. Yeah, I'll pray for them and put their name on the temple, but my interaction with them won't be sort of agenda-based. I'm just going to walk with them on the road that they feel is best with them without any judgment. And I just felt it's more likely they'll make better decisions down the road. They just feel my love, and I'm walking with them. And I sort of say, I trust you. I'll walk with you. My relationship won't change. And not everybody's going to come back, but some may sort of, like you've done, reconsider and wonder, and maybe there's a way back. And sometimes they're open up to the people that have been most loving along the way. Any thoughts on that? I don't know how you feel about there. Anything else you want to share, Elder Smith?
Yeah, I love that. And I feel like that is 100% true. I mean, if we profess to be Christians, if we profess to believe in the Christ, the second great commandment is to love our neighbors. No matter, does Christ say anywhere in the scriptures that it depends on where they're on their life, if they believe in him, if they don't believe in him? No, he says to love your neighbor as yourself. It was kind of funny the other day. I was scrolling through Facebook and I saw a meme, and it was the picture of Jesus Christ giving the Sermon on the Mount that we've all seen. And it's photoshopped, and Jesus Christ says, love your neighbors as yourself. And the Photoshop is a man raising his hand, and it says, even if they're gay. And then Christ responds, yes, even if they ask stupid questions. And I find that so funny because it's true. He's like, it doesn't matter who we are, where we are in our faith journey. We're all sons and daughters of loving Heavenly Father, and we should treat everyone with love and respect, because you never know if a single smile, a single wave is going to change someone's life from committing suicide and changing it. It's a night and day difference. You never know what's going to change. Sometimes it's a simple smile, wishing a hope, a prayer to be noticed. And when we pray, sometimes we feel like our prayers go unheard, that there isn't a Heavenly Father who's there, because all of our prayers have gone unanswered. And yet we still wake up every single morning. We still wake up with a new sunrise. It's a different day. It's a new day. And I like to think about that symbolizes it's a new day in Jesus Christ. It's a new day in the Son, because Jesus Christ is the Son. And he helps us on these journeys that are so hard and extremely difficult to even want to make it through the next day, if not the next minute, second, hour. And yet we are able to make it through when we rely on Jesus Christ. When I've relied on Jesus Christ, I'm able to make it through. And my hope and prayer is that anyone who hears this, if they're willing to rely on Jesus Christ, to rely on those around you, and to reach out to someone that's here, reach out to someone that's willing to listen. I mean, my social media will be shared here.
Good.
Reach out to me. I'm here to listen. I'm here to help. Anything anyone needs. My prayer is that everything will be okay, and I know it will. And so no matter where you are, no matter what's going on in your life, know that you're loved, know that you're accepted, and that you will always have a place in my heart.
Wow. When we talk in the church about the youth are strong and part of the rising generation, I certainly believe that. It's a credit to you and who you are, and the examples of people in your life that have loved you and supported you. And I pray that that just becomes universal. Listeners, I've talked about the Gathering of Israel on the podcast. Elder Smith is out gathering Israel right now. People are looking for the beauty of our healing doctrine and the restoration through Christ that he just testified of. But I think the Gathering of Israel is also LGBTQ Latter-day Saints like Elder Smith. And I have been guilty of scattering with jokes I did growing up that I thought were okay. And so I'm guilty of that, but I just invite us all to do what we can do to gather our own people that are LGBTQ or same-sex attraction or queer, whatever label. They're Israel. They're part of the covenant. They represent the good fruit of Jacob 5, and their ability to create Zion and bring others into the fold is remarkable. And they've been scattered. So I just invite us to do a better job of that. That's part of the reason this platform exists. We haven't talked about shame, but some of the experiences you've had create shame about who you are. Don't talk about it. It's sort of shame, I think, is one of Satan's greatest tools to separate us in the love of God. And if people that we look up to in our life create shame about our sexual orientation, it maybe falsely causes us to conclude that's how God feels about us too. And I think you've done a good job of helping us understand how God feels about you and Christ feels about you. And I think you're created as intended, and there's no mistake made. And that doesn't change church doctrine or church teachings. It just puts you, Elder Smith, on the same moral footing as everybody else in the church. And maybe more importantly, your ability to reach out and help others feel like they belong. I read this quote from Brene Brown every now and then, but this podcast is a lot about belonging and Elder Smith's long journey to feel belonging. And he's felt that at times and not felt that at times. Fitting in is about assessing a situation and becoming who you need to be in order to be accepted. And you've been asked to do that at times. And then the rest of the quote goes like this: belonging, on the other hand, doesn't require us to change who we are. It requires us to be who we are. And so many LGBTQ members exhaust themselves trying to fit in. Belonging allows them to be accepted for who they are. Coming out usually isn't about leaving the church. It's about being authentic, helping to belong in our ward and families. So your story is a story about bravely wanting to belong. It's something that is innate to all of us. It's a natural human motion to want to belong. And more importantly, to belong with people understanding our full selves and not having to mask who we think they want us to be. And you've just done a terrific job doing this your whole life. And I hope the next 25 years are better because of all the work you've done. I also want to read this quote. I'm talking more than usual, but I'm just so moved by Elder Smith. Henry Norwin's a Catholic priest, and he talks about the wounded healer. And I'll read this because this is who you are, Elder Smith, with all the respect I can give you as I read this quote. A minister's service, and I'm going to change those words to a missionary service representing you, will not be perceived as authentic unless it comes from the heart wounded by the suffering about which he speaks. The great illusion of leadership is to think others can be led of a desert by someone who's never been there. So you are the wounded healer, Elder Smith. Incredibly wounding experiences. But you're also the healer because you understand the atonement, you understand the deserts, and you can help other people, and you're already doing this. Help them to know Christ's love for them and their ability to heal them. So you being who you are and being authentic to you are allows your life mission to be possible. You have a great life ahead of you. In this world, and this church is a better place because you're in it. And I love you, brother.
Love you too. I appreciate this. Thank you.
Anything else you'd love to share in closing?
Yeah, actually, I'd like to read this if that's okay.
Please.
Sorry, I have to find it. Do you remember those lonely nights when Jesus Christ took the wrongs that you couldn't make right? And every tear that you cried, every broken prayer, he turned all those for your good. Jesus Christ lets nothing go to waste. We can count on that because we know what he's like. We know his grace. We know his mercy. We've seen him do it 1,000 times, even when we feel like we're dead, in the dead of the night with no hope left to go on. There's never been a morning when the sun doesn't rise. He'll never let us go. We know that it's true. He's still good, and he still has us. You can count on him. Do you remember when you felt ashamed? When you couldn't get free from the mistakes and chains that are on you? He met you with his kindness, his compassion, compelled with his grace. He says to us, if we want to come home, he'll show us the way. He made his mercies new, so we'll never forget what he's done and just how good he really is. He's a faithful God. Every word that he speaks is true, and he always does what he says he'll do.
Thank you, Elder Jack Smith. This is Richard Osler and Elder Smith signing off from another episode of Listen, Learn, and Love.